The Cartography of Awareness, 3-1 Atlas, Harmonic New Moon. Note, it seems these matters are in the air. I came across Bergson's line again, that reality is not made of fixed things, but of becoming, a continuous flow of duration. I've been writing about consciousness and the architecture of awareness, how form, sound, and perception unfold as one field. Maybe that's what this moment keeps asking us to remember, that to be alive is to be in motion, to be becoming. 1. Orientation and early coordinates. After writing about Neptune in Pisces and the way the next months until February 2026 will draw a veil between what is dissolving and what is becoming form, I find myself entering a quieter space. I want to look at the nature of our reality, what defines it, and what lies just beyond the grasp of thought, yet still belongs to consciousness. I have always lived between intuition and logic. Sound and resonance became my language long before I had words for them. In the past years, I have studied biogeometry and explored frequency through sound with tuning forks, humming, the vibration plate, and breathwork, observing how vibration organizes space. I am an intuitive person, but I anchor myself through structure, through systems, numbers, and harmonics, always measuring and tuning in. Since childhood, I have a set of voices, a soft intelligence in my left ear, and growing up, I will call them my consciousness or awareness. They were like 3 old men in robes who lived on the top floor of my mind. They knew every movement and thought, and I learned not to lie to them. Years later, I realized I had the capacity to observe myself from the outside, tuning into that perspective to gain clarity. These inner voices guide me. They offer information before events unfold. Aside from that, my instincts have always been sharp because I can smell deceit from afar. And I am grounded as well in a more philosophical warrior nature. Why fight to survive if there is no meaning? That attitude makes me relentless. I aim to live a purposeful life and do everything in my power to achieve it as it fuels my root center. When I studied Taoism and then Buddhism, early 2000s through the 2010s, I was searching for how form and emptiness intertwine with each other. After years of integration, Qigong, Taoist cosmology, meditation, and contemplation practices, my attention has turned to the ontological. How consciousness works and how it forms itself into experience. Being so empirical, there is an inner need to experience knowledge through books, through direct transmissions, and as holistic integration in my life. Ta-da! A conscious mind can alter reality. Take Taoism. What are these energetic meridians that run in the body? How the seasons and the hours in the day relate to their energy organ functions. How can I trace my design within divine order? Movement, chanting and prayer open a window for healing early on. The teachings made sense. And every time I saw myself getting attached to a school, a philosophy, or a teacher, I left. I want to be my own person this lifetime. When I practice reading charts, astrological, harmonic, relational, I am training the same movement between order and intuition. The chart gives me numbers, angles, and aspects. These are my coordinates. They ground me so that I can open perception. As I connect with the person I am reading for, information begins to organize itself into patterns that are at times not visible on the chart. It is as if logic holds the doorway open for intuition to enter. Robert Monroe will call this tuning to a frequency band. Corny Brown will call it a gathering non-local data. And Federico Fagin might say consciousness is recognizing its own information. For me, it feels like listening to resonance until it becomes language, my language. Ta-da! Instruments and methods. Equilibrium finds itself on the gravity line. The same process happens when I study financial markets. In the past years, I've been learning to read the wavelength of Bitcoin, following price through time as if it were a heartbeat. Numbers, volumes, averages, Ichimoku lines, Fibonacci ratios, Gantt square of time and price. All these are harmonic structures. They reveal the rhythm of collective emotion, the wave of trust and fear moving through matter. When I look at these patterns long enough, something arises. The chart stops being external and becomes an extension of my own field. It is consciousness reading itself through the logic of number in relationship with movement and energy. See new section that launch where I am sharing weekly charts readings. Here's the link. This is why limitation matters to me, because when I work on a public art commission, I begin with limitations such as the budget, the space, and the theme. What the community needs gives me the coordinates within the field as they define where I can begin. Ideas are born as I research the place, its light, its people, its invisible history, and its landscape. Then I open through meditation and intuition to receive what wants to take form there. At times, the ideas arrive as images, tones, and other times as fragments of geometry, as I gather them like clues and start shaping the visual sketches. Then color becomes a frequency and lines become rhythm. Form becomes a statement. When I share this with commissioners, their feedback helps me clarify the intention. It is a long process of trust. I trust myself channeling. They trust their large budget on my abilities to deliver. Once the intention and concept are clear, I can improvise freely, translating the unseen into the physical. At times, it feels like a dialogue between the higher and lower octaves of reality, between the universe of infinite ideas and more specific material. Consciousness, as I experience it, is a field made of resonance, sometimes silence, sometimes vibration, both within and around. Ian McGilchrist describes the brain's hemispheres as two modes of attention, one that grasps, one that opens. Every practice I follow, meditation, humming, vibration platform, trains this oscillation. The body becomes the tuning fork between worlds, and when the two modes synchronize, perception expands without losing the ground beneath it. The body's core, the spine, with its 33 vertebrae, stands as a structure that follows and allows fluidity. I am using this image as the main concept of my upcoming book. Lately, I keep meditating on the powerful, once in a lifetime Saturn and Neptune moving back through Pisces for a period of time. As definition meets dissolution, the fluid structure that can be adaptive yet deceiving and ungraspable. I was born with this configuration: Saturn in Pisces, Neptune 10th house, 12th house ruled by Saturn. The Trinity playing as a main theme in my chart. So perhaps I am wired to study the thin membrane between matter and spirit. Definitions allow consciousness to perceive itself as dissolution allows it to return to wholeness. Reality is a rhythm between those two poles, because it is always breathing and each individual has the capacity to perceive their own reality in relationship with their awareness. When I meditate, when I draw, when I read a chart or a waveform, I feel that rhythm. It is like moving through spheres or dimensions that tune in awareness, whether more physical or emotional, at times mental, creating harmonics in resonance or dissonance. Each has its own texture and frequency, yet they coexist in one continuum. Ta-da! 3. Atlas, the hidden connection. And now there is this object, 3i Atlas. No one really knows what it is. It was first spotted in July, traveling very close to our galaxy, and for months it has been moving near Mars, visible yet mysterious, heading towards Jupiter in Cancer next year. Some call it a comet. Others wonder if it carries another kind of message. I sense that its presence is symbolic, that it mirrors our need to reconnect with the divine intelligence that holds the axis of being itself. In the body, Atlas is the first cervical vertebra, the point where the skull rests upon the spine, the place that allows the head to say yes. It is the hinge of consciousness, the bridge between heaven and earth. Perhaps this celestial Atlas reminds us of the same task: to hold awareness upright, to keep the mind aligned with the heart, to remember that divinity is not elsewhere but passing through us. When new planets or cosmic bodies are discovered, our level of consciousness expands. Each discovery corresponds with an awakening of collective awareness, a new faculty of perception made visible. So whatever 3-1 Atlas turns out to be, whether it's a comet, an interstellar traveler, or something yet unnamed, its arrival marks another opening, an opportunity to perceive reality through a wider field. It signals the consciousness itself is ready to grow. Sound is the thread that keeps them connected. Pythagoras spoke of the music of the spheres, and I often imagine he was describing what Monroe later mapped with hemisync, the alignment of frequencies that lets perception travel. Brown turned that same principle into protocol for inquiry. Fagin gives it theoretical grounding, saying consciousness itself is the field where all information resides. Their work shows the same structure from different angles. I move among them as one would between keys in music. Art, astrology, finance, meditation, they all are instruments. Each offers a different resonance through which awareness can study itself. The chart, the market, the mural, the sound, they are mirrors of the same intelligence. What I seek is coherence, to know reality as consciousness in form. Maybe this is what the next months will be about, learning to read the frequency of definition without losing the grace of dissolution, to stay grounded while moving through the invisible. Quote, the second coming of Christ or the Messiah is individuation. It is the possibility of integrating the self as an individual by living authentically. Shadow work is the process of synthesizing opposites, becoming either A or B, just allowing the third way to emerge, the self. All collectivists have gotten this wrong. Take your space and follow your bliss. Be one with nature, your nature. Be courageous and embody your logos. Dear Mr. Grass, the processes underlying history in the collective unconscious, at least from the Western civilization, have been worked out by Jung in his book Ion, in that strange self-renewing process of the self. Astrologically, we're moving from Pisces to Aquarius, and in the process moving from Christ to the Lapis. That's all I can surely tell you. All my best wishes for your work. Sincerely, Marie-Louise from France. End of quote. This is where I begin the mapping, leaving mystery undefined, but to listen to how it arranges itself through me. That, to me, is the true cartography of awareness. Ta-da! 4. Practice and coherence. The mapping continues through sound. Sound is the simplest form of consciousness made visible and the most faithful to its movement. When I hum, the vibration moves through my bones before it reaches the air. The body listens from within. There is a point when the sound no longer comes from me but seems to shape itself. It becomes a frequency that organizes my thoughts, my emotions, and even the space around me. This is what biogeometry teaches in its own language. Each form holds a qualitative energy, each proportion a living vibration. Through practice, I have learned to sense how an angle or a curve changes the way energy circulates. The same awareness applies to tone, to pitch, to silence. When I measure wavelengths with the pendulum, I'm seeking correspondence, as the act of measuring reveals how consciousness meets material. The tool becomes an extension of my body, and the body an extension of the field. This rhythm is also the structure of meditation, what Monroe called focus, the gradual refinement of awareness until perception stabilizes in new dimensions. In my daily practice, the humming and the platform work follow the same principle. Vibration creates coherence. While the body vibrates coherently, the mind becomes transparent. When the mind is transparent, the field speaks clearly. Fagin will say that consciousness and information are not separate, that every act of perception is a quantum event where potential becomes experience. I understand this directly through sound. When a tone finds resonance in the room, or as it echoes in my body, I can feel the space itself shifting into order. Everything aligns as if reality is momentarily aware of its own pattern. That is what I intend into my day, to move as is every thought, every word, every gesture, where a vibration shaping the fabric of my experience. Numbers have always been another form of sound for me, representing vibrations we can see. The chart, the market, the harmonic series, all speak the same mathematical language. When I observe the ratios in a chart or the Fibonacci progression in a price movement, I see how growth follows rhythm. The ratio is the relationship between 2 points. Each pattern is a wave of consciousness revealing itself through time. Sometimes I wonder if the ancients saw this as music rather than mathematics. Pythagoras spoke of intervals as divine relationships. I experience them as emotional geometries, ratios that carry feeling in relational values. The ratio of the octave feels like completion. The fifth feels like expansion. The minor third carries melancholy. Maybe this is why markets and constellations evoke emotion. They're harmonic mirrors of human movement and behavior. Brown's methodology of remote viewing is another variation of this tuning, creating a system where attention moves through stages, from surface to depth, from image to concept. It is a disciplined way of entering the non-local. I recognize the discipline in my own creative process, tuning into a clarity of signal. When I prepare for a new artwork, I go through a similar sequence: research, silence, reception, translation. The stages differ in language. The essence remains. Remote viewing, sound work, art making, they all rely on the same act of alignment. Sometimes I think of consciousness as a living frequency scale. Each state, waking, dreaming, meditating, creating, resonates at a different octave of the same field. When I am attuned, I can move between them without losing coherence. I call it navigation. The more I train the subtle senses, the more seamless the passage becomes. At moments, I sense awareness folding over itself, seeing itself from both sides, the perceiver and the perceived. It is a quiet recognition. It reveals naturally as though it has always been so. All ancient traditions point to this unity. The Taoists describe it as the return to the source. The Buddhists call it the middle way. Even in the language of physics, equilibrium is a state of least resistance, maximum coherence. It is the same principle that governs sound, geometry, and consciousness. To live in resonance is to live in awareness. Every method, Monroe's sound getaways, Brown's remote controls, Fagin's quantum field, biogeometry's subtle measurements, human design, evolutionary astrology, reading financial charts are ways of remembering that reality listens. I am beginning to see that what I call practice is not a means to reach higher states, but a way to stabilize this awareness in ordinary life. The art of living becomes the art of tuning. Attention becomes the instrument, and frequency is language. There is nothing supernatural in this. It is consciousness learning to perceive its own depth, like water recognizing the movement of its own waves. Everything I study keeps pointing towards the same truth. Consciousness is not separate from what it observes. The chart, the sound, the line of a drawing, the price on a screen, the breath in meditation, each is a surface where awareness meets itself. Sometimes this meeting feels effortless. Other times it is difficult, dense, as if the field resists coherence. Those moments are important as the lucid ones. They reveal the texture of resistance, the thickness of material reality, the limits through which consciousness learns about form. I often think of architecture when I speak about consciousness, an architecture of perception that shapes experience, definitions made of attention, rooms built of color and rhythm, corridors shaped by intention. When attention gathers, it forms structure. When it releases, space begins to open again. This is why I work well with constraints: budget, material, space, because each limit defines a chamber within awareness where something specific can happen in the quantum field. When Saturn, Capricorn draw the line, Neptune, Pisces dissolve it. Creation emerges in their dialogue. In my work and in my readings, I keep seeing how the field reflects our inner tone. When my energy is coherent, events unfold smoothly. When I am scattered, reality behaves like a broken mirror. It is acoustic. Reality resonates with the frequency it receives. That realization makes every practice, artistic, financial, or contemplative, a form of responsibility. What I project into the field returns as experience. Fagin writes that consciousness is primary, that information is born within it. This means that every perception carries creative power. When I think, the field shapes itself. When I hold awareness steady, the shape endures. When I act from clarity, the environment aligns around that clarity. This is the logos, repeated daily in how the smallest intention changes the quality of a conversation, a drawing, or a decision about money. The architecture of consciousness is built from the micro acts of coherence. I have learned that awareness expands through relationship. Every collaboration, every client, every friend or student becomes a mirror. Each one carries a frequency that reveals something I am ready to understand. Sometimes it is in harmony, sometimes it's in friction, but both belong to the same field. What I bring to these encounters is a deep listening. Through others, consciousness learns to see itself in motion. In the larger view, all the systems I practice, astrology, markets, art, biogeometry, remote viewing, physics, are languages describing how energy organizes itself. Each one uses its own symbology, yet they overlap perfectly. Evolutionary astrology maps the rhythm of time, markets trace collective emotion, art makes invisible structure visible, sound reveals the law of proportion, physics translates the same geometry into formula. When I work across these systems, I am learning to read the same sentence written in different alphabets. Sometimes I imagine that consciousness designed this mirror so that we will never forget ourselves. Each field, economic, emotional, artistic, is a reflection of the same order, expressed through different densities. We humans are not separate from it. We're its instruments. There is something else I need to make clear because the word spirituality has been so misused that it has lost its meaning. As a reminder, spirit is not separate from matter. The body does not live without it. When the soul lives as we die, the flesh is still there, but completely inanimate. When the soul enters, the same body moves, breathes, and creates. So how can anyone say that they're not spiritual? To exist is already to be animated by spirit. What changes is the focus of awareness, whether it rests mostly in emotion, in thought, or in the physical senses. To claim to be only spiritual and to reject matter is another illusion. That path leads to poverty of form, to disconnection from the very fabric that allows consciousness to express itself. Spirit needs matter to know itself. Matter needs spirits to stay alive. Creativity belongs to their marriage. When awareness integrates both, life ceases to be a struggle for survival and becomes an act of evolution, a dimension where to thrive. Spirit, Pneuma, is consciousness itself, eternal, unchanging, the field that is always present. Soul, psyche, belongs to spirit. It is the vessel that carries memory, identity, and experience through time. The ego is the sense through which we perceive this reality in relationship to conditioning. There is no life without ego. The scope is to integrate the soul's journey. The soul holds the record of our journeys. The continuity of learning that persists beyond one lifetime. As the soul returns to source, it dissolves back into spirit, just as the wave returns to the ocean. Spirit is the awareness that witnesses all movements. Soul is the pattern that travels through them. Ego is the point of perception that allows spirit and soul to experience themselves through matter. Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss, is the living formula of that truth. Sat, the state of being that animates form. Chit, the awareness through which spirit perceives itself. Ananda, the bliss that arises when soul and spirit recognize their unity within matter. And as a continuation of what has happened over the last decade and a half, when spirituality went mainstream, we began to see how the idea itself became distorted. Many of those proclaiming that they are ascending or moving to another realm are still thinking with the same divided logic, as if awareness were a place, or as if a shuttle could carry them into some external heaven. Illumination is not a destination, it is resonance. You do not travel to a dimension, you become that dimension by tuning to its frequency. When the field of perception widens, when separation in the mind dissolves, you realize you can inhabit many dimensions at once. The training is coherence. The practice is to stop dividing what is already whole. I sense that the next stage of my work will be about refining this instrument, making the translation clearer, freer of interference. It is about articulation. How clearly can consciousness speak through form, through me, through color, through sound, through decision and action? That's the real experiment. Maybe this is a simple definition of awareness I have been looking for: the capacity to create coherence between worlds. To be awake is to allow the invisible move through the visible without distortion. To build from that place is to participate in reality as an author, not its subject. Ta-da! 5. The acceleration, a new field of balance. Pluto turning direct in Aquarius for the first time since the 1770s marks a major astrological shift from the introspection to action, prompting a collective move towards transformation and reinvention. Many projections from the collective may surface as individuals struggle to align with their own design. Historically, this energy correlates with upheaval and reconfiguration, suggesting an era shaped by technology, social awareness, and accelerated innovation. The emphasis is on building what is coherent. The time for dismantling what is obsolete is finished. Sat Chit Ananda, I am the awareness that knows itself. New moon in Libra and Pluto going direct. The new moon in Libra opens a new field of balance. It marks a turning point in how we relate, how we listen, and how we align with what feels true. It invites harmonic coherence, the quiet strength of knowing what belongs to us and what belongs to others. The tone of the energy has shifted altogether. It feels different in the body, sharper in the field, more transparent in the mind. There is a propulsion. Everything that has been in revision since January begins to move forward, revealing how much we have released and how deeply we have transformed. It is cellular. The current itself is moving through us, preparing consciousness for a collective renewal of truth. In addition, Neptune slips back into Pisces this week, so the whole world will echo themes where people are freaking out. I would like to ask for a space of harmony within yourself. This new moon belongs to that movement. It reflects how the soul is learning to balance its emotional needs with its participation in the world. Libra asks for honesty with the self, harmony without compromise, and relationships that arise from inner coherence rather than projection. Jupiter in Cancer expands sensitivity to what we call home, while Pluto in Aquarius exposes what no longer holds integrity in the social field. Together, they invite a more mature balance between belonging and freedom. The finger of God between Uranus in Gemini and Saturn and Neptune in Pisces refines the nervous system and heightens intuitive awareness. Uranus awakens a new way of perceiving through frequency, while Saturn and Neptune teach discernment between structure and illusion. The pressure opens mental clarity that is vibrational. The opposition from Chiron in Aries reminds us that courage and self-assertion are the entry points to healing. The task is to speak from presence, not reaction, and to act from resonance, not defense. This lunation integrates all that has been distilled through the retrograde months. It balances what is inner and outer, emotional and social, intuitive and embodied. With Pluto direct in Aquarius, the soul begins to participate in a new octave of awareness where authenticity replaces performance and coherence becomes the measure of truth. Between now and the next Pluto retrograde in May 2026, the field remains open for application. What has been gestating through the long retrograde now seeks expression through practice, dialogue, and embodied participation. Each step integrates what has released in the underworld phase and tests its stability in the world of relationship, creation, and structure. Take a good look where Pluto is in your chart, because it is revealing the place where metamorphosis is slowly happening. This entire movement prepares the collective for a new rhythm of individual embodiment and collective resonance, where clarity becomes action and truth becomes design. Have a great, great, great new moon. Bye-bye.